Welcome, everyone. Yes, my name is Fatima, and I'm the moderator for this second session of this panel of today's Human Rights Forum. Firstly, I want to apologize for my voice because I'm a little bit sick. We have today three panelists, and I would just introduce a little bit the topic of today with an introduction. It's a privilege to welcome you to the second panel today. Today's Human Rights Forum titled Empowering Women, Combating Violence and Promoting Safety. This session focuses on a fundamental human right. It's women's right to live free from violence, oppression, and fear. It's a truth that emphasizes the principle that women's rights are human rights. As we gather on December 11, it's important to reflect on December 10, Human Rights Day. This day reminds us of our duty to uphold and advocate for everyone's dignity and rights. Today's panel continues that mission by focusing on the urgent need to combat gender-based violence and empower women to build safer, inclusive societies. Violence against women is a global issue. It affects women everywhere, regardless of their social class, economic status, nationality, or culture. This violence occurs in homes, streets, workplaces, and institutions, harming women worldwide. Frameworks like the United Nations Security Council Resolution 1325 and the Istanbul Convention provide tools to tackle these challenges. The United Nations Security Council Resolution 1325 stresses the need for women's participation in peace building and protection against violence. The Istanbul Convention offers guidelines for prevention, protection, and prosecution in cases of gender-based violence. However, progress remains fragile. Intersectionality is key, recognizing that systemic barriers in privileged societies worsen the challenges faced by women based on factors like race, migration status, or economic conditions. For instance, while the Istanbul Convention began as a groundbreaking framework in Turkey, its withdrawal in 2021 highlights how fragile progress can be. Women in Turkey continue to endure grave human rights abuses, including arbitrary detention, violence in custody, and systemic neglect of health and safety for imprisoned mothers and their children. These abuses were highlighted in recent observations of the United Nations Human Rights Committee, which called for urgent action to address these systemic violations. These ongoing challenges remind us of the urgent need to uphold and expand such frameworks globally. Today's panel brings together distinguished professionals who work embodies the spirit of these frameworks and pushes the boundaries of what we can achieve. We had 4 panelists today, but I will also mention Ms. Handan Hoşgören. She cannot be today with us because she's sick. I will start with Denis. She's a clinical psychologist, and she will share her expertise on addressing coercive control in domestic violence and fostering environments where survivors can reclaim their safety and dignity. Marwa Naji, she's a researcher, and she's a researcher on the Universiteit of Ghent. She's focusing on migration and inclusion, and she will bring to light the distinct vulnerabilities of migrant women and the urgent need to intersectional approaches to advocacy and support. Angelica Arombulu is a gender advisor and peace-building expert. She will discuss how policies and diplomacy can address violence, empower women, and create pathways for equality and safety, especially in migratory and post-conflict contexts. Yes, through their contributions, we see the transformative power of bridging research, practice, and advocacy. Together, we aim to explore practical tools, innovative approaches, and global collaborations to combat violence and advance safety for women everywhere. And the public, the audience, I encourage you to engage fully. Ask questions, reflect deeply, and consider how you can be part of this movement towards safety, equality, and empowerment for all women. Thank you for joining us today, and let us begin by inviting Miss Marie Denis. Marie, the floor is yours. Yes, of course. I will change it. Or you can do it, by yourself. I think. Yeah. Yeah.
Donc je vais faire la présentation en français.
And I will translate to English.
Alors voilà, je vais vous parler aujourd'hui du contrôle coercitif. C'est une notion qui a été développée dans le cadre du plan d'action national de lutte contre les violences basées sur le genre. Et en fait, l'idée, dans un premier temps, j'ai été mandatée par l'Institut pour l'égalité des femmes et des hommes afin de développer des outils de détection et d'analyse du contrôle coercitif pour pouvoir améliorer la détection des situations de violence et assurer une meilleure prise en charge des victimes.
So, the presentation of Marie Denis is about coercive control. So she has been mandated by the Institute of Gender Equality to develop tools to mitigate and fight coercive control.
Alors, l'objectif, c'était vraiment de développer un langage commun entre les professionnels, mais aussi entre les victimes et les professionnels, pour améliorer la détection des situations de violence.
So the idea was to develop a common language between professionals and the victim to detect case of coercive control.
Donc, dans un premier temps, je vais vous situer la notion de contrôle coercitif.
So, on the first time, she will. The idea is to position coercive control.
On a pour situer et comprendre ce qu'est le contrôle coercitif, il faut avant tout regarder la dangerosité des situations de violence. Et comment on fait ça ? On fait ça en regardant le degré de contrôle présent dans la relation.
To understand coercive control, first,
il faut regarder le degré de contrôle.
You have to see the level of control.
Le contrôle coercitif va se retrouver évidemment tout en haut de ce gradient de couleur. Donc la dangerosité des situations de contrôle coercitif, c'est le passage à l'acte féminicidaire, donc c'est le meurtre. Et on va avoir différentes situations dynamiques relationnelles dans lesquelles il peut y avoir de la violence, mais il n'y a pas de contrôle.
So the highest situation is killings, feminicides. It's on the highest position, but you can also have situation when
il y a de la violence
when there is physical violence.
Alors, les outils qui ont été développés pour l'Institut se basent sur une circulaire de la police qui identifie déjà les facteurs de risque dans le couple. Et donc, tous les facteurs de risque ont été listés et sont repris dans les outils que je vais vous présenter.
So, on this form from the police, you have all the risk factors listed.
Dans un premier temps, quand on a défini la notion de contrôle coercitif en Belgique, on a trouvé que c'était nécessaire vraiment de mettre au centre le vécu de la victime.
First, when we developed the concept of the first important point, once we define what is coercive control is the experience of the victim.
Pourquoi? Parce que la victime, justement, elle connaît mieux que quiconque l'auteur, mais aussi elle a ses propres vulnérabilités dues parfois à des situations extérieures, à des causes extérieures, comme le fait d'être une femme migrante, par exemple, ou une femme porteuse de handicap.
So the victim, on the first hand, know better the situation due to her experience, but also to external factor like being a migrant or a woman with handicap.
Ensuite, pour définir la notion, on a tenu compte du cycle de la violence parce que il y a un cycle qui va s'installer autour de la victime, qui va venir rythmer vraiment la relation entre l'auteur et la victime.
The second thing we define is the cycle of violence. Around the victim there is a cycle of violence that will define the relation, that rhythm the relation.
Ensuite, on a identifié dans la littérature que quand on parlait de contrôle coercitif, forcément, on parle de schéma de comportement. Donc, c'est une notion qu'on a retenue aussi pour définir le contrôle coercitif en Belgique.
Based on academic literature, they also use the idea of a schematic behavior to define coercive control.
Et enfin, on a les stratégies de l'auteur.
And finally, there is the strategies of the perpetrator.
Dans les outils créés pour l'Institut, on a explicité chaque stratégie avec des comportements afin de permettre aux professionnels d'identifier ce fameux schéma de comportement qui va se répéter dans le temps. Donc, il y a des grilles d'analyse très fines de ce que peut faire l'auteur et qui, de prime abord, ne va pas s'apparenter à de la violence, mais quand on identifie chaque comportement, à ce moment-là, on identifie que c'est quelque chose qui dure dans le temps, qui se répète et dont les conséquences vont se cumuler.
In the tools developed by the Institute of Gender Equalities, there is this grid with the behaviors of the perpetrator taken isolated. It not necessarily imply violence, but taken all together, you can see that there is a scheme and there is a violence that is perpetrated in a long time.
Et donc, en fait, la notion de contrôle coercitif, elle amène un changement de paradigme. C'est-à-dire qu'elle nous invite vraiment à considérer les violences entre ex-partenaires comme une privation de liberté et de ressources.
So, taking this in consideration, you need a change of paradigm and to consider that the violence are also for the victim, for the partner, a privation of resources and freedom.
Alors, il y a plusieurs outils qui ont été développés. Il y en a 3. Il y a un outil de détection rapide qui est sous forme de questions, un outil de détection du contrôle coercitif et de ses signaux d'alarme, et un outil d'évaluation beaucoup plus approfondi de ce qu'est le contrôle coercitif.
There is different tools to detect coercive control. First, there is a quick form designated to a police officer on the first line to detect. Then there is another tool to detect coercive control and signs that can
Red flag.
red flags Thank you. For psycho workers. And finally, you have a more a deep form to evaluate destination to psychoclinicians.
Alors ici, c'est le premier outil où on a mis l'accent sur le contrôle des ressources, parce qu'en fait, le contrôle des ressources, c'est un indice clair qu'il peut y avoir du contrôle coercitif. Et c'est d'autant plus important quand la femme est une femme migrante, parce que si elle est dans une relation, par exemple, qu'elle est venue en Belgique au travers d'un mariage forcé ou autre, elle va se retrouver dépendante de son compagnon. Et le contrôle des ressources est souvent central dans les situations de contrôle coercitif pour les femmes migrantes. Donc, c'est une question qui est centrale aussi, en général, chez les victimes de contrôle coercitif. Mais étant donné la vulnérabilité que le processus de migration va induire chez les femmes, le contrôle des ressources est encore plus présent.
They wanted to highlight the importance of the control of the resources, like financial control, especially for migrant women who is in a situation of dependence, like in a forced wedding, for instance. The first thing you notice is the control of her resources.
Alors, il y a différents outils qui sont en train d'être développés justement pour pouvoir aller identifier le contrôle coercitif chez les femmes qui ne maîtrisent pas la langue ou chez les femmes qui ont une déficience, qui ont un handicap. Et donc, ces outils, ici, ça va être un jeu de cartes qui représente toutes les formes de violence, toutes les stratégies qui peuvent être mises en place par l'auteur. Et on va essayer d'identifier avec la personne, on va lui montrer les cartes, on va lui demander d'en choisir plusieurs et de nous expliquer pourquoi elle a choisi ces cartes. Et donc, c'est un outil qui permet de facilement identifier les stratégies présentes et donc de mieux évaluer la situation.
They developed a card game addressed to women in difficult situations, like with handicap or who cannot speak local languages. So through this game, they can easily show strategies used by the perpetrator, and so for them it's easy to identify them, even if she cannot communicate easily.
Alors c'est important aussi de questionner la victime et d'aller chercher cette info, aussi pour elle-même, parce que la victime souvent est dans une grande confusion. Et donc pouvoir mettre des mots sur ce qu'elle vit, ça va aider aussi à ce que ce soit plus clair pour elle. Et elle va retrouver un peu de pouvoir sur la situation, elle va pouvoir petit à petit mettre des choses en place avec les professionnels. Donc c'est important aussi d'utiliser ces outils pour qu'elle sorte de la confusion.
Very often the victim is confused and has shared feelings regarding her partner, and so it's important to empower her and to clarify the terms, to explain to her the situation she is living. It's kind of abuse, and so that's the first step, is to being able to put the correct words on the situation with her.
Donc c'est dans cette idée-là qu'on a aussi développé des cartes pour que la victime apprenne à identifier ses propres symptômes, qu'elle apprenne à les gérer. Donc c'est ce qu'on appelle la psychoéducation.
So it's in the same idea that they develop other cards here in the idea of psychoeducation for the victim to identify their own symptoms.
Alors, il y a une notion très importante aussi dans les outils qui ont été développés, c'est le continuum. C'est-à-dire qu'on veut amener de la nuance et vraiment de la finesse dans l'analyse des situations de violence pour pouvoir mettre en lumière les zones d'ombre, entre guillemets. Donc, tout ce qui va se rapporter à la couleur orange dans l'outil, ce sont des situations où il y a contrôle coercitif, mais le contrôle n'est pas encore complètement installé. Et donc, les outils permettent vraiment de mettre la lumière sur ces situations qui nécessitent une prise en charge.
So there is a continuum of possibilities. That's why they developed these color codes. So here in red, it's when there is no indication of danger. But you have all these orange situation when there is alarm signs, and it's important to take the situation in charge as soon as possible.
Donc ici, il y a les red flags associés au contrôle coercitif. On va y retrouver les menaces, l'escalade de la violence, la peur de la victime, la persistance des comportements de l'auteur. Et alors, ce qui est assez novateur, entre guillemets, c'est de tenir compte vraiment du niveau de conscience de la victime par rapport à sa propre situation. Parce que si la victime n'a pas conscience d'être dans une situation de violence et qu'elle commence à résister, ça va augmenter les risques. Et donc, tous ces outils sont pensés pour travailler sur la victime tout en évaluant la situation.
All these tools has been developed to work with the victim because sometimes she is not conscious of the situation, and so.
Il y a aussi la menace.
So there is, for instance, threats.
L'escalade de la violence.
The escalation of violence.
La peur de la victime.
And fear of the victim.
Et enfin, le dernier guide, là, c'est vraiment pour les psychologues cliniciens. Je ne vais pas l'exposer ici, mais il y a beaucoup de pistes d'évaluation qui sont données et beaucoup de pistes d'intervention aussi. Comment prendre en charge les victimes de contrôle coercitif, quelle posture adopter avec elles et quelles questions poser.
And finally, this other guide has been developed for clinicians. She will not develop here, but there is a lot of tools addressed to those professionals.
Voilà, merci.
Thank you, Marie. Now we can pass to Marwa. Yes, the floor is yours, Marwa.
Thank you for the invitation and for the warm atmosphere here. Thank you for the presenter from the first panel and from here. I will just follow up on what Marie-Denise was mentioning, but it is more on a migrant context. So to give a bit of context, my research is about migrant women coming from Tunisia, as Tunisian myself, after the Tunisian revolution of 2011 and the context how they flee the country and come to Europe. Better? Okay, so the situation is in a migrant context means that somebody left his place where he's born, where he have family, where he have connection, when he have sometimes job, study, and when the person leave, he don't live just as a body, but of course with all the identity and with all the capital he got from his country of origin. And sometimes and especially during my fieldwork, I was interviewing women who left from Tunisia, and sometimes some of those women, I have to be honest, it's a minority, but some of them, they left due to violence, but it's not only like men to women violence, but it's also, and this was mentioned a lot, like due to societal violence. So it is something that is institutionalized by the state. But while coming to Europe and imagining the situation going to be better, coming to the heaven of human rights, women's rights, all the propaganda that we hear about it in our countries of origin, they came here in a legal or illegal way, how they can call it, like what we refer as haraga, like they come in a legal way, but also women who come in a regular way and who have paper and so on, they face a lot of kind of oppression. And this violence faced by women made them a vulnerable social group, as they are objected to a subjective violence, but also an objective violence. And this is what I'm going to present and to give the definition. So as an objective violence, it's a non-material violence. It's a violence that you cannot see. It's a zero level. It is seen as the perturbation of the normal, peaceful state of things. So it is not aggression, but mainly objective. We have also this subjective violence that migrant women can face, which is what Marie presented. It's like violence, it's a body violence. So migrant woman vulnerability can be tackled through different perspectives, like from domestic violence, for example, the gender-based violence, or GBV, or the EPV, intimate parental violence, which happen in the house. But there is also a society violence, which like we can call racism or xenophobia, which is happening outside. And for example, during the Corona, a lot of migrant women who faced violence in the house could not go out and could not like go to civil society to ask for a help. And during that time, a lot of civil society organizations mentioned that they asked the women to endure the violence, like to wait, like because they have no help, because the state don't give such help, especially during that pandemic time. So the women, and also through field work, I had to listen to women saying that yes, I had to endure the violence, I had to be patient, because if I leave my house, I have no place to go. And some kind of the institutionalized violence, for example, that we cannot see, which is not in the body, but for example, in the law. For example, in the Belgium law, the migrant woman who came in a marriage contract cannot have her paper, only after 5 years of a marriage. If during these 5 years you go to the police to say, I got violent, I don't want to live with this man anymore, he's not treating me well, depends if he's a Belgian or non-Belgian, but with a Belgian citizenship, they can just send her back to her country of origin, because if he don't sign her paper, she is not allowed to stay here. So this control is used by men, but it is given to him by the state, for instance. it's used by the man against the woman to endure this violence. So a lot of women have to wait until 5 years, and we never know what could happen during 5 years. And of course, these have like consequences on the children, on the relationship, and so on. And the state cannot do anything. And a lot of women who flee their country, they are at the risk of staying with someone who like violent against her, or going back to their families. And a lot of women, and we can say like migrant women who flees their country, they flee, for instance, the patriarchal society, they flee the rules of their father or their brother against them. So it is somehow what a scholar called intersectionality. It is the intersection of factors that put the migrant woman in such a vulnerable situation, and those factors can be their first of all, their gender, because they are women, but of course their identity as like, for example, Muslim, or like African, or like any identity, but of course based also on their religion. So the migrant woman vulnerability can also be shown on the intersection between the EPV, the intimate partner violence, which is happening at home, but also within the intersection of the factor of poverty, because somehow we only found women on this situation who come from the working class, or women with no like fixed job, for example. And again, during the Corona time, this category of working class women, and we all know that mainly the 3D, what we call 3D jobs in Europe, means the dangerous and the dirty and unsafe jobs are given in the host society to the migrant women. And those jobs were very risky during the Corona time. So during a risky period, always example the Corona because it's the most previous one. So during those time, those women find themselves on the intersection of their gender or their situation as a migrant, but also on poverty. So this situation and their class identity didn't help them to get out of the cycle of violence. And I also put here some quotes from from the fieldwork, and I would narrate a bit of it. So we had the kind of women who came to Europe within, like, let's say, based on love stories and all, but because of the problem of the paper, they could not go out and work, so they end up in the house doing what the husband asking for. And when they go to ask for help from the state, for example, they got neglected because they have no right to stay without the permission of the husband. So it is somehow a kind of the racism, but also violence perpetuated by the state. But while, as a scholar, for example, we analyze the racism, we analyze the migrant woman, forgetting that the migrant woman or the migrant in general are not the perpetuator of the racism. In fact, the racism is applied from the state, so we have to tackle the subject from this perspective, and this is what the critical race theory advocating for. So instead of analyzing the situation of the migrant women, we may analyze the situation of the state and how they, in a direct or indirect way, put this racism on the institution. So we can see it in the housing system, for example. For migrant, it's very difficult to get to have to rent or to get into jobs and all. But all of those problems are, let's say, multiplied when it is a woman, especially women with a very symbolic religions or identity symbols. So a lot of women mentioned that their partner were very aggressive and they forced them even to quit their jobs because having some financial independence for them means have a bit of freedom, which is not what the men wants actually. So they had to leave their jobs in order to end up at home just doing what the husband asked for. So this systemic harm of domestic violence in migration context is, of course, and in most of the time related of having their paper and being legalized on the state and having their residence permit. And these, of course, show the intersectionality of the social inequality and domestic violence within migration context, because this transnational violence from private to the public state shows these structural inequality. So again, the intersection of the factor put the woman in a vulnerable situation that is a continuum violence from the private, but also they cannot find their security in the public space, which is a continuum violence against them. So this power that the state use against migrant, which is given to the men, is somehow a modern racism that has several bases, such as the sexual racism and based on the gender inequality. In the migrant context, the abuse is doubled, of course, and at a multi-level expansion. So, as I mentioned in the beginning, the migrants are discriminated first as a woman, then as a migrant, but also being a female outsider, like a migrant coming from another country, cost a lot on migrant experience, psychology, and well-being. I will go fast to what we can advocate for. So to advocate for independent migrant women, let's say it's a challenge not only for the women, but it's a challenge for the migrant together, because as migrant we could face the same struggle, but what for example, the European Union or the Global North do is making our struggles segmented. So we have the right of migrant women, migrant children, minors. So the segmentation of the struggle make it very very difficult for each group to tackle their own struggle apart, but within the unity, according to research, of course, within the unity of the struggle as a migrant together, not based on identity or in religion, we could make more effective law and more effective solution to the situation of the migrant. Another thing I would add here is that the fact that migrant and the propaganda of the far right, especially in Europe and especially on our last election here in Belgium or in the other European country. Within the rise of the far-right party, of course, the racism would perpetuate more and would raise more, and the only solution that we can tackle it is together within the people who are in the favor of the oppressed and against all form of racism against women, but also against men, of course.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Marwa. It was really interesting. I will pass now to Angelica. Yes.
Well, in the meantime, thank you everyone for being here, and thank you to Solidarity with Others for organizing this space. My name is Angelica Arambulo. I'm a gender and peace building consultant and advisor. I'm also part of the steering committee of Women in International Security here in Brussels. And today I'm gonna be discussing how policy and diplomacy can actually play a key role in supporting migrant women and in addressing gender-based violence, and especially for women that are coming from conflict-affected countries. So let's see if we can have the presentation. If not, it's okay. We can continue. No worries. Something with the network. There we go. First, I want to address the importance of gender equality in peace building, just to give a bit of context. And it is known through different studies that women's participation actually increase the likelihood of peace being sustainable through time. And in a study done by Krauss et al., it was shown how peace agreements will be 35% more likely to last at least 15 years when we include women. However, women's involvement worldwide still remain low. And according to the Stockholm International Peace Research Institute, in 2022, only 60% of women were negotiators in UN-led peace process, and only 18 of the peace agreements signed that year had a female signatory. So there is a underrepresentation still worldwide of women when it comes to peace and to negotiate peace. And then when we think about like migrant women as well, there is not that representation because many of these women have to leave their countries and be in a new country where they might encounter violence, they are victims of displacement, and they have limited access to resources. And here is when policy and diplomacy can come into play and offer a pathway to support women and migrant women. So policy can be a fundamental tool for preventing gender-based violence and protecting women in different conflict settings. And we have different international frameworks. One of them is the Istanbul Convention that I think was going to be discussed today. Unfortunately, we didn't have the opportunity. But these, for example, have provided essential guidelines for governments how to protect women and including migrant women. Because they tend, as I mentioned, they tend to be victims of displacement and they will have a lack of social networks when they are being displaced. So policy needs to prioritize gender-sensitive initiatives and also ensure that women and migrant women are included. And it is also known that higher levels of gender equality can correlate with lower likelihood of conflicts both within and between states. So this also should be a central point for any diplomatic efforts. And here I want to show, for example, the women's representation in peace processes. And for example, in 2022, no women were included in peace negotiations or attempts of peace negotiations in countries as Ethiopia, Myanmar, Sudan, and Yemen. And 2023, women on average made up less than 10% of peace negotiators and 13.5% of mediators. So here. Then when we think of diplomacy, there is, different provisions. And we have, for example, the Global Compact for Safe, Orderly, and Regular Migration that gave like some indications as well of what can be done. However, they just launched their latest report on the 5th of December, and it was indicated that among the 82 countries that completed a migration governance indicator, only 23 countries had a migration strategy addressing the different needs of migrants. So it's only not about having the frameworks, but also implementing it at the national levels. And I want to give an example as well of my past experience while I was working at the Consulate of Colombia here in Belgium, and we encountered a lot of gender-based violence, and there was not a strategy at the moment. So we actually had to, after receiving many cases, generate a strategy on how to address this problem, and we found several commonalities that were also mentioned by Marga. That was like difficulty with the language, lack of knowledge about rights. So we did awareness campaigns, we did workshops, and we partnered with a local NGO that actually was working with migrant women that were affected by gender-based violence, specifically addressing Latin American women. So it was in Spanish, and this was like something different because it was knowing about their rights, but in their own language and understanding what can be done. So, and I bring this because this is also an example how diplomatic missions can support migrant women. And we providing them with information and resources that can be accessible and relevant. And another issue that migrant women tend to be affected is related with human trafficking, and I think this is also where policy and diplomacy can play an important role. because, well, first of all, women that are being displaced from countries in conflict are more vulnerable to human trafficking, women and girls. And different organized crime networks will exploit these vulnerabilities. So diplomatic efforts would be essential to address this, and states need to communicate with each other. They need to strengthen their international cooperation and share intelligence, knowledge about what they know regarding human trafficking, and also invest in combating human trafficking. Another important point regarding how policy can support migrant women is through economic empowerment. And this is a critical element to any migration policy, because migrant women will face significant barriers related to economic independence, including limited access to employment, education, financial resources. And addressing these kind of barriers is important for the well-being of migrant women, but also the stability of the communities they are joining. And through policy, it is possible to allow women to have access, for example, to vocational training, language education, financial inclusion programs. And this also, I also saw firsthand, because many women will come, sometimes displaced by armed conflict, and they would not know what they could do, for example, with the skills they already have, or how they could validate their diploma here, what were the opportunities. So it's also policies that promote these kind of programs and are available in different languages. So I think it's important that there is gender-sensitive economic policies, and so ensuring that women have equal access to employment and resources. So women in the new environment where they are, they can thrive instead of just survive. And there is also a need, there is a holistic support for migrant women, and this includes different aspects regarding healthcare, and with this is sexual and reproductive healthcare as well, mental health services, and legal protection. And I wanted to bring the case study of Colombia when we think also about peace and peace building, because women were involved in the negotiation, and this has been international. An example, and there was specifically a gender subcommission that established and ensured the integration of gender perspectives. So the involvement of women brought to the table topics or issues that usually will not be brought to the table, as sexual violence, for example, that affected women through conflict, and also gender-based violence that was determined as a war crime, and women joining also the peace process made that reparations and justice for women and members of the LGBTQA+ community were available and were included. So the Colombian peace process has been a model of what can happen when women are involved. And also, I think something very valuable is that the process still hears women that are now migrants in another countries and left actually because of the conflict. Here, for example, in Belgium, we have the collective Women for Peace, and we are still in connection with the peace process in Colombia and advocating for peace and women to be included in further efforts that are going to continue regarding peace in Colombia. And well, in conclusion, when we talk about building sustainable peace and supporting migrant women, I believe policy and diplomacy need to prioritize gender equality at every level. I think there needs to be a connection between policymakers and those who are directly affected by policies. And I think we need to continue advocating for policies that are gender sensitive and empower women and also migrant women, so diplomacy can also ensure that their protection, rights, and participation are protected in every areas of society. And I just want to leave with this phrase that peace is just not the absence of conflict, but it requires the presence of justice, equality, and opportunity for everyone. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Angelica. Now, we would now like to open the floor for questions. If you have a question for any of our speakers here, you can raise your hand or feel free to share your thoughts too. Yes.
Actually, I have three questions, but firstly, thank you for this very invaluable presentation. I know there are some immigrants in this room, including me. That's why, firstly, I want to ask a question to Dr. Marwa. You mentioned some intersecting struggle like racism and patriarchy. There are two institutionalized, maybe systematic struggle here. But I think it's important to inform these immigrant women about their rights, also way of struggle with these institutionalized discriminations. So do you think what could be the ways of be informed for these immigrant women? Do you think, should I ask my question one by one or total? Okay, yeah. My second question. So the first question is about the migrant informed. Yeah, how can be informed to those women? I think this is important because if they know, how can they struggle with these patterns? I think this would be easier for them because when you come to the new country, you don't know your rights here. I think it's very important.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you want to answer.
Okay, the second.
And the second one, what could be the role of the civil society for combat to these institutionalized systematic discriminations? Also, I think we have some ways to struggle as a civil society for those things. Yeah, these two questions for you.
Okay, so I believe you answered your first question within the second question, because how the migrant could be informed. Like there is, of course, what we called in a scholar and I worked a lot on it, the network. Like when the migrant women come, of course, there is always a network. And for example, going back to history, we can say there is like some population, they go more to this country. Like for example, Turkish coming more to Belgium, or Tunisian going more to France, or like those patterns that exist already, and those exist mainly for Algerian, Tunisian, Moroccan, for example. They exist because of the colonization history, so we already had connection with our ex-colonizer, and then of course the language play a huge role on that. So as Tunisian, for example, we prefer to go to France, and when you go there, you are not the first one there, so there is always a generation and connection that you have, and this we call it the network theory, that people usually use their network, like family or friends of the friends, and this is how they could navigate the settlement when they come, for example. So this is one how they could, but it is not official. It is not something that but through my own experience, the network is more feasible and is more effective to the migrant than what we call like official support or civil society support, because when you got the advice from someone who had the same situation, it's always more effective for the migrant. But this is a self-reflection. But yes, like in migrant theory, there is the network theory that helps the people navigate the new place, the new society, where to go to learn the language. And of course, everybody here who have the migrant background could say that, like, my sister told me which school is the best, or like, my friend helped me to get the first job or the rent or something. So this is one. But as I mentioned, it's not official. Second thing, and that's what you already mentioned, is the civil society organization. So civil society organization who works with migrant can be always and of course useful, but the fact that the civil society sometime and the people working on organization, when they are not migrant themselves, they cannot help a lot, because they somehow miss some like effective way to do the things when we come as like a migrant or as a stranger to the new country, because from a civil society perspective or from an NGO perspective, they have the law, so they can tell you, yeah, these articles say, yeah, or like, for example, yeah, you have to go do the integration courses. So this is what is written on the paper. But in the migration context, the things are not how they are written on the paper, and it's not what is by the law. For example, when you read the integration program, and I will refer to Belgium as we are in Belgium and I know the case best. So when you read the integration program, when you come, they give you the language for free. Like, for example, in the Dutch part, you can go have the language, you can go to recognize your diploma, and they help you navigate the social life there. Okay, when you read it, it's the perfect plan to have it, to make your life easier, to face all the struggle. But in a practical way, it's not true, because they just bring a lot of migrants together in a classroom, trying to ask each other infinity of questions, because they are all like newcomers and so on. So it is not really helpful. And I know a lot of people just take the courses just to have the diploma, because they will use it afterward for the citizenship or so on. So by the word integration itself is discrimination. By saying integration, because we are human, so we integrate. Like, if I go to any country, I will integrate myself very easy. So I don't need a plan. I need just laws that make my life easier. Not to say, yeah, as a Tunisian or as this or that nationality, you cannot do this job because your diploma is not recognized. This is what makes it difficult. Need the integration. I don't need an integration plan. I don't need the integration program. I can integrate myself. People and human are like moving. So it's very easy to integrate and to navigate. And if people just want to move from one country to another, these mean also their ability to integrate. So the idea of integration on itself is a false idea that the global North is using to make more barrier for the migrant to navigate the settlement process in Europe or in the host society.
Thank you so much for your answer. And yeah, my last question to last speaker. Actually, you highlight some points. There are like an increasing number in the representation of women in peace building process. But I wonder, how about their impact? Is their impact really increasing? Because there's a way of illusion, like you can say there's more representation, for like an illusion to make more gender equal, but is it really working equal in the practice, do you think?
Well, I think, well, first, inclusion is important, but then it's also that women can be in leading roles, because then what it has happened, and I talk specifically about Colombia, which is my expertise, is that then women will be leaders, but only at the local level. And then that will leave them without many resources or actually ways to promote what they want. So it is difficult if women cannot actually access leading positions, I will say. Yeah, so I do think it's important that women continue being integrated, but not only, but also like in leading positions is very important to have a greater impact. Otherwise, it will remain the same, and we'll keep touching the same ceiling glass.
Yeah, thank you so much for your answer.
Yes. Do we have other questions? Someone? Yes. Yeah.
Hello, everyone. So I will speak about my personal experience. I am a migrant. I have been living here more than 4 years, let's say almost 5 years. I was a teacher in my country, so I had to come here. And then I faced situations like you mentioned, both of you in your presentation. So first of all, I was going to do my job, teacher. I really want to do my job here, but I faced some kind of obstacle on my way. For example, my hijab and a language issue. So my question, both of you, how can we handle it? Which platform can we discuss about this? Because a lot of my friends try to get a job because their background also a teacher. And I know Belgium needs many teachers in the education, but we applied many schools. I have many friends, but we didn't get any results. And sometimes they don't mention about your hijab. They don't mention, and they just say, okay, your language level is not good, but they don't give us any chance to improve it. So how can we handle it? Which platform can we discuss it? Because the government gives all the rights to the manager, so a manager can decide everything about your profile. So how can I handle with this problem for next generation? I believe it's really important. Also, we have problems in education. I believe opportunity, equality, and something like that. So my question is both of you. What is our duty? What is our homework as a migrant in this situation? Thank you.
Okay, so again, like the situation of migrant is being segmentized by the state, for example, and let's stay on the context of Belgium. So after they had like enough, for example, nurses, they decided not to accept nurses from such countries because they think that the diploma from other country are like, inferior to what they teach here, which is okay if we ask the people to have like some period of compensation or some period to strengthen the language, which is fine. Like you cannot be a teacher, for example, if you don't handle the language. So, but the problem is that it's something that we don't see, that it is not written in the law, that there is no law saying that a migrant cannot teach, but it is the fact that this filtered policy, but this has come from politics. So if we have far right governing in such a country, of course we would see such practice, which is not often to happen when we have the left governing, because it's somehow it's the politics, it's the policy of the state. So how to navigate it or how to challenge it, it's of course we don't have the solution, but the struggle on itself, to challenge the system on itself, to make our voice heard. It's something, it's a step forward, let's say, to do it. But we cannot struggle it personally, you cannot do it by yourself, but we can struggle it together within like a civil society organization, within ourselves, organized together within creating the organization, within facing it. The fact that you speak about it, the fact that you make it heard, the fact that you talk to your community about it, you can together like come together and try to face it, like to write and to talk about it. I'm not saying this is the solution, because like that you will not be hired the day after, but it is a process of a fight, a process of a struggle that the global north or the capitalist system put us on it, so we have to face it, we have to struggle against it, and that would be my answer.
I think I agree. It's a matter of continue advocating, and I think challenging the stereotypes that are there about migrants. And there is different sort of stereotypes, as you know, for example, with Colombia, we have long history of conflict, drugs, etc. And that's the first thing people is going to address to you. Or it has happened to me in meetings, people saying, oh, Colombia, exotic, this kind of associations, you know? And then it's like, okay, but I'm going to continue advocating and showing that I'm not just exotic, or I'm not just coming from this context. There is a lot of like, is there to offer. So, and I think the power of the collective is very important, and that's where I think I have found more strength, because it's supporting each other and continue raising, I think, the awareness and fighting the stereotypes that we face as migrants.
Yes. I would also like to add something. There are also in Belgium institutions who are fighting against discrimination and racism. So if you are in contact with racism or with discrimination, please share this with these institutions like UNIA. And this is also a good way to signalize the problem, because sometimes we are facing these problems, but we are speaking this with each other, with people who are like us. But the government, these institutions are not knowing this very well. Maybe they are knowing it well, but when we raise our voice more and more, so that will have also more impact on the policymakers. So my suggestion is also that. Thank you. Do we have other questions? Or not? Okay. I have a question to the panelists. while the challenges we face are significant, the insights and expertise shared today reminds us that progress is possible when we work together with determination and solidarity. And before we close, I would like to ask one final question to the panelists. What is the one message you would like to share with young women? We have a lot of women here in this local. So, what are your message to young women, especially because they are our future? They will form the next generation. So, yeah.
Thank you for the questions. I think I would say like continue the fight for gender equality is still a long way. We have achieved things, but it's still needed. And also, I think is not backtracking from there, because given the current situation, politics, and what is happening worldwide, women's rights will be attempted to be diminished. So I think we need to continue the fight for gender equality.
Okay, I will pick Angelica also word, like we have to continue the fight for gender equality, but also for human rights, because our struggle as women, for example, as migrant women, is not separated from our struggle as a human being. But we have to be aware, and I ask everybody here to just position themselves, who I am and who is my, if we can say it like that, my enemy, who I am struggling against. It's not the man, it's mainly the system who created. So we have to tackle the genealogy of this discrimination. So it's all in one, like this system that we are facing nowadays. So our struggle is not against each other, but our struggle is together against the system that put us together in this situation. So, and I leave it here. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, thank you very much. And if I may add also my message to the young girls and women here in this local. So my message is especially to never give up on lifting each other up and standing in solidarity. And also activism is it's really important. So in these times where populism and the far-right governments in Europe are really on a high level, so we have to be activists everywhere on the internet also, but also with us together. It's really an important thing to be activism, raise your voice, and be together and be in solidarity. Thank you. And thank you also once again to our remarkable panelists for sharing your knowledge and vision, to our audience also for your thoughtful engagement. Thank you. And I would like also thank you to the organizers for creating this important platform for dialogue. As we leave here today, let's carry forward the ideas and inspiration from this discussion, whether through personal actions, community initiatives, or advocacy. We all have a role to play in building a safer and more inclusive world for women and for everyone. Thank you.